Hello and assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Kashif Kamran, and I'm back with another very important discussion for students appearing for the AAA exams in September 2022 and onwards. There is an emerging issue, or the students of AAA can refer this as a current issue. And I will just tell you how this thought came to my mind that this is a current issue and the students appearing for exams in September 22 and onwards should have this topic ready. The consideration of climate-related risk in an audit of a financial statement. This is the current issue. We know climate risk and climate changes is becoming a burning issue. And in the last 1 month or so, we have seen a lot of publications coming from ACCA for the paper AAA and SBL around the same topic. We just saw that in the month of August 2022, the AAA examining team came with 2 articles. Primarily, it was one article with part 1 and then the part 2 titled Assurance on Social, Environmental and Sustainability Information. I already covered both the articles and the videos are available on the YouTube channel. And then the SBL examining team in the month of August came with 2 articles, Responsible Leadership, and then they came with an article, Environmental and Sustainability Issues. The focus, the theme of all these articles was on environment, was on sustainability, was on the role of the management when it comes to planet, when it comes to sustainability practices, when it comes to environmental practices, the role of the auditor, the AAA articles, in providing an assurance on the social, environmental, and sustainability information, or in while the auditor is conducting the audit, ensuring that the other informations which are published with the financial statements, what sort of information is published for social, environmental, and sustainable information, and the role of the auditor. Now, that was covered in my series of videos I uploaded. All the new articles published by SBL AAA has been uploaded by on my YouTube channel. But the bottom line is the central idea of these articles is moving around environment, sustainability, climate. Now, while I was looking at the mock exam, the September 22 mock exam for on the practice platform of ACCA, I just want to show you that on your screen. I hope you can see this practice platform in front of your screen now. The question number 1 of the mock exam for September 22, there was the partner email in the first question. And when I was looking at the partner email in the first question, where we had some typical requirements, the first requirement asking the students to consider the audit risk, the second requirement asking for procedures. There was a third requirement, C, which was very, very special. And that's where a mindset was developed that this is an emerging issue. There is no article yet on climatical changes or climatical risk by the examining team, but the articles written on assurance on social, environmental, and sustainability information, part 1 and part 2, do help us identify the mindset of the examining team that this area, the environmental area, the sustainable area is becoming important for future AAA exams. And this requirement in particular is opening the mindset of the AAA student and the tutor myself on a different dimension. And I'll just come to that shortly. If you look at the requirement C on your screen, which I will be analyzing on a proper Word file, using the information provided in Exhibit 4. So examiner is saying, just go to the Exhibit 4. I've given you a certain information in Exhibit 4. Just look at that, comma, discuss the climate-related risk that should be considered by the audit team during the audit. What sort of climate-related risk should be considered by the auditor during the conduct of the audit of the Bransfield company? you're not required to consider the impact of such matters on the audit report. The examiner is saying, don't tell me that what is the impact of the particular risk on the audit report, because this is a planning question. You just want to discuss the matters relating to the climatical risk to the planning and performing of the audit for 8 marks. So as simple as that, the examiner is asking you, discuss how climate-related risk could affect the planning and performance of the audit. So you are planning the audit of the Bransfield company. Question number 1 is set at the planning stage. So while you are planning the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company, there is a certain information given to you in exhibit number 4. How would that help you in planning and performing the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company? Climate-related risk and its potential impact on the audit, leaving aside the Bransfield company, is becoming an emerging issue. And that's where I would like to do my presentation today on the same subject matter, the consideration of the climatical risk or climate-related risk in the audit of the financial statement. If you're planning the audit of a company, just like the Bransfield company in the mock exam for September 22, what should the auditor do extra? How would the auditor mindset change? We know auditor is skeptical and auditor do exercise a due care, but in that context of being skeptical and exercising due care, how would the auditor consider the climate-related risk when he's planning the audit, when he's assessing the risk of material misstatement in the financial statement? And while he's performing the audit, what sort of things needs to change for the auditor in terms of procedures, whereby he is more focused on the climatical risk? Let's first understand this topic broadly and then come down narrow to answering the 8 marks requirement from the September 22 mock exam. Now, I did put this question on my presentation because I would like to solve it in my session today. The question number 1C from the mock exam on the practice platform, and that was the requirement which we just read directly, that there is an exhibit number 4, which we will be looking shortly. And in that exhibit number 4, examiner wants us to discuss how the climate-related risk would be affecting the planning and performing of the audit. Now, planning and performing of the audit, how the climate-related risk would be affecting the planning and performing of the audit for the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company in 8 marks. We have to discuss, right? So 2 multiplied by 4 is equal to 8. So we need to have 4 discussions. 4 discussions. This is a knowledge question, right? Not 1 mark. 1 mark means you're writing 8 discussions, which is a too lengthy answer. And that's not required in the AAA paper, because when you are discussing something knowledge related, current issue related, for example, the examiner asks you to write advantages and disadvantages. They normally fetch 2 marks per. So over here, 2 marks per discussion, and you move on. So you need to have 4 discussions that how climate related risk would be planning and performing, would be affecting the planning and performing of the upcoming audit. Now, what exactly is in the exhibit 4? Because that will help me to explain you what sort of a boundary as a student you should be operating in. Because climatical risk is a broad subject matter. But we need to narrow it down to the AAA paper. We need to narrow it down to the mindset of the examiner. We should read the mindset of the examiner. That's what is going inside the examining team mindset for September 22 exams and onwards. Not necessarily you get a question right in the September 22 exams because it's in the mock exam. And it could also happen because it's in the mock exam, you might get a question directly in the September 22 exam. But even the future students, December 22, March 23, June 23, you should also be alert of this, right? Because I foresee articles being published on climatical risk in the upcoming sessions, not just for AAA, but even for SVL. Let's see what is in Exhibit 4 and then start our discussion. This is Exhibit 4. I just copied that from the platform, the practice platform, so I don't need to switch the windows again and again. And I just focused on this short, concise discussion with you. You can do it directly on the platform. Now, this is Exhibit 4, and the Exhibit 4 is telling us in the mock exam, I'm just reading it. The International Auditing and Assurance Standard Board, IAASB, has issued an audit practice alert to the auditor's consideration of climatical risk. And I'll be sharing the hyperlink of that with you, that if you want to do an extra reading or you want to read through this audit practice alert published by IAASB on the climatical risk and the auditor's consideration. If you want to read that, it's just a short document. But if you want to read it, do read it. But again, this is not a document which you're reading word by word, sentence by sentence, and trying to understand everything out of it. That's not the need of the AAA paper currently, right? That you go reading every single sentence and you say, oh, what does this mean? What does this mean? No, just understand and just make a mindset. Just read through it, develop a summary of it, and just even if you understand like 50% of this article, at least you have developed a central idea. And that central idea for a question like 6 to 8 marks on a climatical risk would help you in the exam paper. So I'll be sharing that link with you shortly. So that practice alert by IAASB recently has prompted the AAA examining team to put a question in the September 22 exams, in the mock exams, and have alerted me as a tutor and you as a student as well. So obviously, as a tutor, I'm very watchful of the development taking place around AAA. And from wherever you get a hint of something changing and something changing in the upcoming exams, as a tutor, it is my responsibility to alert you as well. Though there is no article yet on this subject matter by the examining team, but because there is a question, we need to be alert of it. After the full stop, it says, we will need to make sure we follow this guidance as Brandfield company is becoming more exposed to climate-related risk. Now, this is what the partner is telling to the manager, because this is the question number one. So partner is telling to the manager, we will make sure that we follow this guidance from IAASB in the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company, because Bransfield company is becoming more exposed to climate-related risks, such as flooding. So one of them is the flooding affecting hotels, as mentioned in the exhibit number 2. Now, when you read the exhibit number 2, there is already some flooding instances, and those floodings have damaged the property, the hotel property. They're running the hotel business. And we know the tourism industry is at a significant risk of this climatical changes internationally, globally. We know these tourist hotels are set up at beautiful locations near the rivers, near the mountainous areas, near the sea areas, coastal areas, and that's where we have the high risk of climatical changes, the typhoons coming in, the cyclones coming in, the impact of the global warming coming in, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, and they're all affecting the ecological systems of our planet, because we have affected the planet as individuals, as companies. We have damaged the environment, and now it's the environment which has become harsh on us. The global warming is rising, and these issues are affecting industries worldwide, primarily the hotel industry. Full stop. Other clients within the hospitality industry are also seeing evidence of climate-related risk. So the partner is saying it's not just the Bransfield company affecting; it's the other hotels as well, which are being affected as well, where they have hotels located in areas affected by hurricanes and bushfires, which are occurring with a greater frequency. This is reality, right? This is reality. We do see instances rising of harsh weather conditions globally, abnormal weather conditions. We have seen extreme heat waves in Europe recently, and it's predicted that there will become more extremes in the years to come. So that is something unusual for the European countries. We do see a rise in the bushfires because of the rise in temperatures. We do see the glaciers melting. We do see the rise in the water levels. We do see hurricanes coming more. We do see cyclones coming more. We do see typhoons coming more. And there's a total ecological disorder currently. So the hotel industry, Bransfield is from the hotel industry. They've already seen some floods affecting their property, the hotels, and the partner wants us to be alert to this climatical related risk, particularly in the backdrop of the publication coming from IAASB. The last line, we will need to adapt our audit approach accordingly for key audit areas that are impacted by such events. So the partner is telling the manager that for the upcoming audit, we need to adapt our approach, the planning and performing of the audit, because that's the two areas being asked for 8 marks, that how would the climatical related risk affects the planning and performing of the audit. We need to adapt, we need to change our approach accordingly for key audit areas where we will be focusing on in the upcoming audit. What will be the risky areas? Which areas we will be more alert to when we go for the upcoming audit in the context of the climatical related risk. So see, such a wonderful exhibit that even if you don't know something about climatical related risk, the exhibit number 4 is put in such proper sentences that you understand. So there is an alert from IAASB. That's what the examining team is telling us. And that alert has prompted the partner of the Bransfield company. And the partner has asked the manager that in the context of this new development, kindly consider that how we need to adapt our approach for the upcoming audit in the context of the key audit areas that are impacted. And we know the hospital industry is at that particular risk. And there are issues relating to like hurricanes and bushfires, etc., which are coming in and rising the level of uncertainty for these businesses. Let's now quickly understand a bit about the climatical risk and the auditor responsibility, and then let's quickly draft in the answer for the question. I've shared some links if anyone wants to do some extra reading or you are interested in reading, because I believe that habit of reading is going down. These are not ACCA publications, but these are publications around the climatical risk and the impact on the audit practices, or climatical risk and the impact on the financial statements prepared by the management. There is an IASB publication. That's exactly what we were talking about, the Climate Audit Practice Alert. That is what the partner was telling us in exhibit number 4. So this first link is extremely important because that's what was discussed in the exhibit number 4. So that's extremely important for you to go through. That's a PDF. So you just need to ensure that you get to this link. I'll try my best that I can share this PDF with you as much as possible. There is an ICAEW publication on the same climatical changes and how these climatical changes is affecting the accounting, how it's impacting the financial statements. And there is a Deloitte publication, one of the big 4, on the same subject matter, climate-related matters and the effect of the climate-related matters on the financial statements. So a lot of publications already from the regulator, from the chartered accountancy bodies, from the audit firms, and from IASP as well. So that is where exploration can come in. So if you have a good mindset as a student, you can just spend like 3 to 4 hours going over the very first one only. And that first one will make your mindset for taking on a 6 to 8 marks question in any of the recent upcoming exams in 22 or 23. So that's recommendable reading. Now let's get down to my subject matter and just let's spend 15 to 20 minutes on understanding the climatical situations, and then let's go down solving the 8 marks question, because I just don't want to stretch this session beyond a certain time, because this is just a current issue. Okay, let's go to my Word file. I'll be sharing everything written on this Word file with you, so don't be worried about everything here will be shared in a PDF form with you. Now, I tried picking paragraphs from the IAASB alert, from the ICAEW publication, and the Deloitte publication, because I just read 3 of them and just tried making summaries, taking things from all 3 of them and putting in one context, just to read the mindset of the AAA examiner and to develop something very good for all of you. Now, current issue, climate risk and auditor, a discussion by the tutor, Kashif Kamran. The very first paragraph tells us, I'll just be reading quickly because I just don't want to make the session boring by reading through. It's your responsibility that this article comes to this selection of a summary from myself will come to you and you just read through it. But just want to reinforce how would you be going about it. The IAASB has issued guidance. That's what the Exhibit 4 was telling us for the auditors on the consideration of the climatical risk in the audit engagement. How would you consider the climatical risk when you're planning and performing the audit? That's what the question is expecting from us. The guidance recognize that the issue of climate change is increasing, that's no doubt, and is becoming of greater importance for investors. This paper highlights the current IAS that are more relevant to the auditors in the climate-related risk. Now, first thing which you need to make very clear, there is currently no auditing standard which deals with climatical risk, or there is not even an international financial reporting standard which deals with climatical risk for the financial statement. They are under development. But the current ISAs, how would you consider the current ISAs and you adapt the current ISAs to climatical risk? Or how would you consider the current accounting standards in the context of the climatical risk? So this particular paper issued by IAASB highlights the current ISAs, not the new ones, the current ISAs, which you are familiar with, which are relevant to the auditors when they're considering the climatical risk. The second paragraph, the IAASB guidance acknowledges that the term climate change does not feature within the current ISAs. That's what I was telling you. The term climate change, whichever ISA you read, you will not find a term climate change because the current ISAs are not equipped with it. But yes, how can you use the current ISAs for planning and performing the upcoming audit of Bransfield Company? How would you use the current ISAs in the context of the climatical change now becoming important? That's what this article tries to explore. So there is no current ISA, right, on this subject matter. However, it emphasizes that the auditor are required to identify and assess the risk of material misstatements to the financial statement, to perform audit procedures in response to those risks, and to obtain evidence that is sufficient and appropriate, and to provide the report, right? So that's what the ISAs focus on, right? They require us to assess the risk. They require us to mitigate those risks. They require us to gather evidence, and they require us to issue a report. And that's what we need to consider in context of the climatical risk. Now, the question in the mock exam was saying that you're not considering any impact on the report. You're only considering the effect on planning, where we assess risk, and the effect on performing, where we gather evidence, right? No down towards reporting area, right? So the current ISAs are dealing with these parameters. You go down the next paragraph, very important one, the auditor responsibility, because that's what we're looking for in the Bransfield Company. The auditor responsibility in the audit of the financial statement is to obtain a reasonable assurance that whether the financial statement as a whole are free from material misstatements or not. To enable the auditor to report on whether the financial statements are prepared in all material aspects in accordance with applicable financial reporting frameworks. If climate change impacts the entity, which is impacting our company, Bransfield, the hotel industry, if climate change impacts the entity, then the auditor should consider what? The auditor should consider, critical, very critical, whether the financial statements appropriately reflects this. If there is a climatical risk, for example, the hotel industry, the Bransfield Company being affected by typhoons and cyclones and bushfire, it is becoming an indicator for impairment. Has Bransfield Company recognized impairments? Have they recognized appropriate levels of impairments? Because if the hotels are affected, the properties are affected, you need to consider about the possibilities on impairments. So IS 36 becomes very important in that context. This is just a thought process. So if climatical change affects the entity, the auditor should consider whether the financial statement appropriately reflects this. Is the management giving disclosures of climatical risk to the shareholders of the hotel industry? We know that lots of disclosures about climatical risk are outside the financial statement. We know the companies publish other informations in the annual report. The company publish sustainability reports, which are other than the financial statements. Company publish environmental reports, which are other than the financial statements. So a lot of information about climatical risk are shared by the companies, but that's outside the financial statement. The financial statements don't have any disclosures of the climatical risk, but we do see this happening in future because climatical risk are becoming important for investors, for their wealth, and they want the financial statements to have adequate disclosures of climatical risk and the impact on their profitability or future profitability, and they want to see that. But currently, the disclosures are given, but they're outside the scope of the financial statement, and that's in the other information. I've covered my article. I've covered the discussion recently on the new article by the AAA examining team, assurance on social, environmental, and sustainability information. The part one, sorry, of the article, where we had the responsibility as an auditor under ISA 720 to read the other information and to find is there any inconsistency between the other information and the financial statement. So auditor do read other information, right? So if any climatical related risk have been disclosed in the other information, the auditor would be reading that and the auditor would have knowledge of that. And the auditor needs, because currently there are no related disclosures of the same parameter in the financial statement. So auditors should consider whether the financial statements appropriately reflects the risk. Full stop. In addition, the auditor needs to be aware. So second, auditor needs to be aware, not just considering, but should be aware, knowledge of the business, of how climate-related risk relates to their responsibilities under professional standards. How climatical-related risk falls under my responsibility, under your responsibility. Knowledge of business. We need to gather knowledge of business. ISA 250, consideration of laws in the audit of the financial statements. When we are planning the audit, we need to consider the applicable laws. There are so many countries which has now introduced environmental laws, which has now introduced laws for emission, greenhouse gases. So many governments are coming with laws which is affecting the automobiles and automobile industries. They want the diesel cars, the petrol cars to go off by 2030. In lots of European countries, there are regulations coming in that by 2030, there will be no petrol car, no diesel cars. Now, that's where the inventory, that's where the automobile industry is being affected for future. A lot of capital expenditure required in your manufacturing process, a lot of cost increasing for the automobile companies. They need to ensure that they're not piling up inventories a lot, because you will not be selling the petrol cars and the diesel cars anymore. They need to switch to hybrid cars, the electric cars, the solar cars as soon as possible by 2030, because after 2030, you will not be selling them anymore, the diesel and the petrol cars. So a lot of structural changes, a lot of cost, a lot of expenditures, a lot of property, plant, and equipment, a lot of I-16 coming in terms of the management thought process when they look the future in terms of these climatical risk. So auditors should be aware that, are they aware of the laws and regulations? Are they aware of the changes coming in the industry? Are they aware of any fines and penalties coming to the business because of the laws and regulations coming in? So auditors should have plenty of knowledge, right? That's what we do at the planning stage of the audit. So auditors should be aware of how climatical related risk relates to their responsibility under professional standards and the applicable laws and regulations. Full stop. The guidance therefore highlights some of the current ISAs that may be relevant to the auditor. Current ISAs that may be relevant to the auditor, because we know there is no new ISA on climatical change, and even these current ISAs don't even use the word climatical change as its form. So I think we're getting some part of the answer, which the examiner wants us to discuss in the case of the Bransfield company, that how what should the auditor consider in planning and performing the audit of the Bransfield company. I think this is where we're getting the answer. This paragraph here, right here, Control C. And if I can just put in the answer for my question. Just trying to construct my answer here. Answer to the question number 1C from the September 22 mock exam. And this is the first thing. I think if the climate change impacts the entity, so in our case, it was hurricanes and bushfire. So if the climate change impacts the entity, you just need to modify this word. We just need to rephrase this word. I'm just taking the context from the alert directly. Then the auditor should consider, the auditor of the Bransfield company, whatever the name is, should consider whether the financial statement appropriately reflects. So typhoons and bushfires affecting the hotels, have the management considered the associated impairments? In addition, auditor needs to be aware of how climatical risk affects their responsibilities as an auditor under professional standards. Have they got adequate knowledge of the laws and regulations affecting the hotel industry? Any new climatical laws coming on the hotel industry? Is the auditor aware of any new climatical laws on the hotel industry which could affect in fines and penalties for the business, etc.? You just need to rephrase these lines, bring it in context of the Bransfield company, bring it in the context of the hotel industry, where the answer could start constructing in. Okay, let's go down quickly, read the other parts of it, because I would be emphasizing that it's better that you read through this article. That's extremely more important. Just give me 1 minute if I can bring the question down here so we can have a proper answer to that question. Just let me put the question here. The question 1C from the September 22 mock. Just let me bring it from my practice platform. This is the question, right? Okay, so this was the question, right? Using the information provided in the Exhibit 4, I've already shown you the information in Exhibit 4 when I was discussing the PowerPoint presentation. Discuss, number one, how the climatical risk should be considered by the auditor. You're not required to consider the impact on the report, just the planning and performing of the audit. So how would this affect the planning and performing of the audit? And this is the first pointer we got from the IAASB alert. Just need to rephrase that, right? Okay, now moving back quickly, uh, the current ISAs, which could be important when you are planning and performing the audit, ISA 315, that helps us to assess risk. So if there is any associated risk, that would be captured by ISA 315. ISA 320 help us to define the materiality level in the context of risk. 330 is how the auditor would respond to the climatical risk. What sort of audit procedures will you be developing? ISA 250, the laws and regulations, any new laws and regulations coming for environment, climatical risk, which the auditor should be aware of. Evaluation of misstatements, ISA 450. During the course of the audit, if you find any misstatements, any issues like management has not recognized impairment, or the management has not appropriately valued the inventories in the context of climatical risk, how would you consider those misstatements? ISA 450 estimates, a lot of estimates comes in primarily when the management is even determining the recoverable amount of an asset. There is a lot of estimation in determining the recoverable amount of the asset. So how would the auditor ensure the estimates are right? 620, using the work of an expert. Obviously, climatical risk is an expert area. The auditor might think about hiring an expert, engaging an expert to have a better understanding of the climatical risk. And again, we know there is a prerequisite the auditor has to follow for an expert, independence, competence, experience. You're not knowing these ISAs, right? The list here is just giving you a mindset. There are so many ISAs currently where when you are planning the audit, you use them. When you're performing the audit, you use them naturally. But you just try to think that, okay, I can connect them with the climatical risk now. I can think about risk under ISA 315. I can think about using the work of an expert under ISA 620. I can think about how the management estimates the recoverable amount because of any potential indicator or potential indicator arising from a hurricane or a bushfire, that under the ISA 540. 570, going concern. The climatical risk can have an impact on your material uncertainties relating to going concern. Lots of climatical risk increasing, impacting industries globally, can even bring question marks on your future sustainability and a material uncertainty relating to going concern. ISA 260, communication to TCWG. So if you find any climatical risk, you find any climatical risk affecting the entity, there are any issues, any problems, you have to discuss this with TCWG. ISA 700, the impacts on the audit report. ISA 701, key audit matters. So if there is any key audit matter, just 1 minute, sorry. If there are any key audit matters, you believe climatical risk is a key audit matter and the auditor has focused on that during the audit, you know the key audit matter, right? You in the key audit matter, you tell the area of focus and how you addressed it. So I believe climatical risk is an area of focus, and how the auditor addressed it, the shareholders would like to know that. So that's where the reporting impacts can come in. And ISO 720, your responsibility as an auditor to read other information, because you know the most of the climatical information is in the other information, which I've already covered in ISA 20 discussions I did in the previous article, Assurance on Social, Environmental, and Sustainability Information. And in my regular classes, I've covered this in my ISA 720 discussion. So the list is not to be learned here. The list is just, these are the standards you've done in your regular AAA course. And you know what each standard means here. You know what the auditor do with each standard in the course of the audit. But you just need to think about the adaptation of these standards to a broader climatical risk. So use of experts, risk assessments, estimations, communicating matters to TCWG, recognizing the climatical risk as an area of focus, as a key audit matter. Your responsibility as an auditor of reading the other information becomes more greater with climatical risk developing. Laws and regulations, knowledge about laws and regulations is extremely important because you should know the new laws coming in for climatical due to climatical changes, etc. So I believe there are certain ISAs which are very important. Assessing the risk, number one, then consideration of laws is very important. Then working with an expert is very important for climatical risk. Going concern is very important because it's impacting a material uncertainty. Communicating with management is very important for climatical risk. Identifying it as an area of focus, key audit matter, and your responsibility for reading the other information. So the ones highlighted in blue are more critical ones, which at least has an association with your AAA paper and a very close one. So this is the IAASB alert telling us that there is no new ISA on climatical risk. Even the current ones don't use the term climatical risk, but that's where the adaptation has to come in the context of exams. And in future, we do foresee new ISAs coming on climatical risk. But I hope you understand the first 3 paragraphs from the alert and you understand this list down. The final thing, and you start reading the rest yourself, the purpose was just to communicate this to you. I hope after this communication, you know there is a question in the mock exam which is for 8 marks, addressing the Exhibit 4, climatical risk, asking you, discussing how the audit will be impacted, the upcoming audit will be impacted, and I'll just be writing the answer for that. But just finally, the potential implications arising because of the climatical risk, not just for the hotel industry, we are speaking in journal. Now, this is something which I took from the ICAEW publication and the Deloitte publication because they were more focused on the financial statements. We do believe climatical risk can affect the asset impairments in the goodwill. The climatical risk can affect the useful life of the asset. For example, the government comes with a regulation and the government wants something to be suspended in the next 2 years. And you are using an asset, you are using a manufacturing plant, and the manufacturing plant has a 10-year useful life still. And the government comes with a regulation that this manufacturing plant should be discontinued after 3 years and should be replaced with a more environmental friendly manufacturing plant. Now, you need to revise your useful life under the government regulations. Instead of 10 years, you need to depreciate your asset now on 3-year basis and replace it with a new one. So I think the amount of government regulations coming on the property, plant, and equipment, shortening the useful life, replacing your existing assets with more environmental friendly assets, changing the techniques of manufacturing, just like the example, putting to the end the petrol and diesel cars and bringing the hybrid cars, there is a lot of structural changes required in your manufacturing process, a lot of recognitions of property, plant, and equipment, a lot of I-16 would come in, how you recognize the revenue expenditures and the capital expenditure. Even the revision of the useful life of asset would become more important in financial statement. And that's where the auditor has to be focused on when he's conducting the audit of the companies. Fair value of the assets would change. The climatical risk would impact on the fair values. So auditor would be very much alert under IFRS 13, would be very much concerned about how the fair value of the assets are determined, considering the climatical risk. Is the management assumptions right? Changes in provisions and contingent liability. A lot of fines and penalties coming on the companies because of non-compliances with the laws and regulations. The laws and regulations are rising, for the climatical risk, and the auditor should be alert of that. Knowledge of business. Expected credit losses. This is primarily for the banking industry under the IFRS 9. The recognition of expected credit losses. We know that the climatical risk will also impact on the non-performing loans. The climatical risk would also affect the business ability to pay back the loan to the bank. There would be a lot of liquidity issues arising because of the climatical risk, because if there is a structural damage to business because of the climatical risk, the ability to pay back would be hurt. And that would affect the credit losses. for the financial institutions. So IFRS 9 would become important for a banking industry primarily. Now, that's where you need to consider things up. That's where you need to be focused on that how the climatical risk is affecting the financial statements. The financial statements will be affected for impairment, the goodwill, the useful life of the assets, the fair values of the assets, fines and penalties, and expected credit losses. So just ensure, I've given a list under here: climatical risk and critical standards. ICE 1, what sort of things can come under disclosures of ICE 1 under the climatical risk? Please read through this. ICE 36 just discussed a bit about that how impairment becomes a more critical standard under the climatical risk. Then read through the property, plant, and equipment. I just discussed that with you, that the expenditure would rise. Intangible assets, that's more important. A lot of research and development expenditure would rise in the future because of more investment coming into climate-friendly practices. So I think the research and development expenditure would start going up for businesses, already have started to go up. Recognition of the research and development in the right accounting manners would be critical, and the auditor should consider that as a risky area. Fair value measurements, just read through that. IFRS 9, we just discussed the expected credit losses for the banks. Just read through that. Contingents, the provisions, fines, and penalties. That's it. So these are critical areas of financial statement where perhaps the auditor should be alert of when he's planning the audit. And just read through these accounting standards because they're connecting with climatical risk. I've just put the summary under each one of them, that how each one of them connects with the climatical risk. So when the auditor is planning the audit, he should be alert, he should be skeptical, he should know which potential areas of the financial statement could be affected because of the development of the climatical risk, so on and so forth. So you should know the critical IAS. We don't expect any broader questions coming in near future exams, but as a student of ACCA, you know these standards. But just try to adapt these standards to how they fit the climatical risk. No accounting standard is using the terminology climatical risk, right? But we just need to adapt them to foresee how they would be. So we discussed potential areas of financial statement. We discussed the list of ISAs. We discussed the list of accounting standards, and we have a mindset. I've shared the links with you. You need to explore them. Primarily the first link, which is the IAASB alert. Now just let's finalize things up here. Using the information in Exhibit 4, discuss how the climate-related risk should be considered by the auditor. I hope that mindset is now developed during the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company. You're not required to consider the impact on the report, just the planning. So I believe what should be the suggested answer? Apart from the statement I took from the alert, and you can modify that, but just honestly look at, if I'm a student sitting in the exam hall and this question comes in front of me and I have no idea, I would start answering myself that if I'm auditing the Bransfield company, how this would affect my planning and performance. Number one, the auditor should obtain sufficient knowledge of the hotel industry for the upcoming audit in context of any new laws and regulations, primarily for environment, climate, etc., which could affect Bransfield company. So when I'm planning the upcoming audit, even though I have an idea of the hotel industry, but auditors should obtain sufficient knowledge of the hotel industry for the upcoming audit in the context of the new laws and regulations, if they have been any, particularly for environment and climate, which could affect the Bransfield company. There could have been some developments in the last 1 year since you did the last audit, and the auditor should take any updated knowledge to take on. Further, the auditor should understand that how climatical risk in the hotel industry is affecting the business and the financial statements, because auditor needs to take knowledge of not just the business risk but also the risk of material misstatement. So auditor should understand how climatical risk in the hotel industry is affecting the business and the financial statements, and which areas of the financial statements are more prone to material misstatements. I've just given you a discussion on that, like I-36, the property, plant, and equipment, the intangible assets, fines and penalties, right? Which areas of financial statements are more prone to material misstatements in the context of the climatical risk developing? Okay, just let's make a different point for this. Auditor should understand how climatical risk in the hotel industry is affecting the business and the financial statements. And which areas of the financial statements are prone to material misstatement in the context of a climatical risk developing. Affecting the business and the financial statements, should understand how the climatical risk in the hotel industry is affecting the business and the financial statements, and to have understanding of relevant ISAs and IFRS applicable in context. Which areas auditor should understand and develop mindset? Which areas of the financial statement are more prone to material misstatement in the context of climatical risk developing, so on and so forth. Auditor should discuss with management their approach to climatical risk and reporting, and whether any information related to this has been published in the annual report. So if it is, the auditor would be reading it under the ISA 720 in the annual report. So this is what you're doing at the planning stage, asking management, do you publish something about climatical risk or something like that? If you do so, then I will be reading it under the ISA 720. Finally, the auditor should gather sufficient, appropriate audit evidence in critical areas under climatical risk. For example, impairment testing, capital expenditures for the new hotels, fines and penalties, provisions, etc. So these are the critical areas the auditor would be focusing on. So just try to discuss how the climatical related risk should be considered by the auditor when you are planning the upcoming audit of the Bransfield company, knowing the fact there is an Exhibit 4, there is some information in that. It's already telling you there has been bushfires, there have been typhoons. So there is already a potential risk of impairment. There is a potential risk of capital expenditure. There is a potential risk that there might be some laws and regulations which you are not complying with, etc. So take a bit of hint from Exhibit 4. Try to draft in the answer for 8 marks. You just need 4 points to develop, and go through the reading of the summary I made from 3 publications, IASP, ICAW, and Deloitte, on the relevant standards, I-37, and how you need to deal with it in the context of climatical risk, IFRS 9, IFRS 13, the I-16, the property, plant, and equipment, I-38, intangible assets, I-36, impairment of the assets, I-1, presentation of the financial statements and the disclosures, then potential areas of the financial statement and the relevant ISAs. I hope once you take a printout of this, you watch my video, you keep this notes in front of you, you read through this, you have a development of a mindset, and that is it. It's not like area where you're expecting a 40-50 marks case study, not at all, but this is just an area where you just need to have a mindset. You're not blank. You know there is a climatical risk. You know the world is changing. You know things are becoming bad in the world. You know there are lots of climatical issues rising globally, and that's where the pressure is coming on the financials, on the management to report, to make financial statements reflective of the climatical risk, because the investors are very much alert to that. So you need to understand that already we are living in a world in 2022 where these things are happening in front of us. We know there is a pressure, we know there is a pressure from governments, from the regulators, for rectifying, impairing, improving, and lots of sustainable practices are coming up, though that's too less in the context of the damage which has been done to the planet. I've already given you the list of these publications. Please ensure you download them. The first one, again, is the one you should be focusing on, at least mandatory. But if you read my summary on the Word file, then no need to read the publication. No need to read the publication if you just read through my summary. But this is at least a reinforcement that these are recommendable readings. I hope this session will benefit you, at least in terms of an alert. The alert is the question number 1C of the September 22 mock exam. The alert is the publication by IAASB on the audit practice alert in terms of the climatical changes. And I hope this session at least would help in the dissemination that you got the information about it. If you were blank, you were preparing for September, December, March, and you had no idea of this, and a question comes for 6 to 8 marks, you would have regretted yourself. But at least if this message gets to you, that is more important, that you start preparing this self, the question on the Bransfield company. And this was a thought process on this current issue, consideration of climate-related risk in the audit of financial statement. If any publication comes in future from the examining team, I would be doing a session on that, but hopefully not for September, that would be for December, because time is up for September exams now. But I hope this discussion would be beneficial for all of you. I would like to see your comments when you watch this on the YouTube. And I would like to see that you press the like button as well if you do like it and want to see the comments as well, because these efforts are done for all of you to make you successful in the upcoming triple exams. Wish you all the very best. This is your tutor Kashif Kamran signing off from this emerging current issue, consideration of climatical risk in the audit of financial statements. Take care, goodbye, and Allah Hafiz.